That. Isn't that because, no,
Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried, thank you. We move to the action sheet on page 10. And it's interesting that Councillor Fenn's not here because I gathered up all the farming magazines that have had stories on Mycoplasma bovis and I was going to give them to her to read. So there must have been something about that that I forgot to bring them. They're sitting on the kitchen chair, but not the chair that I sit on. So there's been quite a lot published in the farming media. And are there any, do you want to speak to your family? A question from Councillor McLean.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just see in that action sheet about fanworm. The meeting before I asked that question about fanworm and I got a reply later on that that boat had been checked, had been taken out of the water, been cleaned and had been passed. Was the result I got. It was just interesting to see it's still there.
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps I can clarify. As soon as we detected that there was fanworm on the boat, it was pulled out and cleaned. So that's perhaps the report that was given to you, that action was immediately taken. But in the action sheet, we've just identified as been requested by the committee that from the scientific analysis of the state of the fanworm, we do believe that it came in with the boat, so it brought it in. Just also, while we're on fanworm, an update for the committee, we had hoped this week to be doing our twice yearly check. Obviously, the wastewater overflows on the weekend meant that we didn't feel it was good to have divers in the water, but they will be next week down here and doing a full check of the port area for the fanworm.
Thank you. Councillor Cranston?
Just out of interest, really, did we know the ease of moving from a boat to residing under the pier, or does it happen immediately, or do they just stick to the boat? Or?
So through you, Madam Chair, we're very pleased that all of the fanworm we have ever found there have not bred. So that's part of the reason why we send them away for scientific analysis, which MPI funds. But we are asking the question about why we are still finding fanworm if we just have the legacy of the original infestation, which came in 2015, we think. So this time around, we will be checking very carefully around the berth where the forestry logging ships berth at, because we are concerned that we haven't been able to access that very frequently, and we just need to be very sure that there is not a population that we haven't detected. If we do find that there are no obvious population we've missed, then we probably have reached the conclusion that we're getting continued reintroductions, and that means we will need to think about what we do in terms of stepping up our marine biosecurity on vessels coming into the port. And in actual fact, there'll be a report on your next committee agenda about marine biosecurity and the need for pathway management around that.
Can I just ask a supplementary then? So when, out of interest, because it is of interest, when a particular boat was identified to have it, do we send that message back to its home port so that they can follow up if potentially it was berthed in another port?
So through you, Madam Chair, this particular vessel was actually a Gisborne home port vessel, and very disappointing that they had not followed appropriate hull cleaning procedures, because it had been a vessel which had spent some time in Auckland and Coromandel, which are both very well-known sites for fanworm, and vessel owners are required to clean their hulls, and unfortunately this vessel owner hadn't. So we have been giving a strong message to owners of boats in the Gisborne port that if they go outside of the region, that they should be cleaning their hulls before they come back. But I guess that's where a marine pathway plan, which we've been talking about for about 2 years now, but nearly there, would actually give us some stronger regulatory authority to require that.
Thank you. So we move to page 14, and that's the annual report on the dog control policy and practices. Thank you very much to our dog control team who are in the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gary McKenzie is going to give us an update on the actual report. This is an annual report that we have to do as required by the Department of Internal Affairs, and Gary's just going to take us through that. Following the report, we will look to notify and send the report to the Department of Internal Affairs and put it up on our website.
Thank you. We've all read it, so councillors, are there questions to Mr McKenzie? Thank you, Councillor Stoltz.
I just had a lovely thorough report, and I've noticed, and Councillor Wharahinga and myself had a discussion earlier, that over the years we've seen a lot of work being done in this area, and we were both happy to see that there's also now a big focus on education of the public, and thank you for that. What I wanted to ask you about, which was of interest to me, is in 2 places in the report you mention about special special owner applications, but I couldn't find in the report what do you have to do to be a special owner to get a discount on your dog registration, because I think if members of the public might know about that, lots of them might do what is required in order to get a discount on the dog registration. So I was just wondering, what are the requirements in order for you to qualify for that? Thank you.
Yeah, through Madam Chair. To be qualified as a special owner, there's certain criteria you have to meet. You have to have your dog in an area of the property where somebody can actually come onto your property and not be confronted by the dog. That's one of the kind of key requirements around special ownership. In regards to anything else, Ross, do you have?
Come forward if you like, Chair. Thank you.
Excuse me. So also you must have your dogs microchipped and registered on time every year. If you fail to not register your dog before the end of July, your SOP will be revoked and you'll pay full for that year. And then you must, to get it back, you must then register before the 31st of July the following year, and then you can apply after that.
And it was a little hard to hear, Mr McKenzie, but I think you said they need to be contained within a yard at the back of the property so that people can access the property without being confronted by the dog.
Yes, that's correct.
I thought everybody had to have that opportunity to access a property without being confronted by a dog in an urban situation.
Yeah, that is correct, but it's one of the criteria that they have to meet as well.
Thank you. But we expect all owners to have their dog contained, not
Yes.
at the front door.
Controlled.
Controlled.
Sorry.
Could be chained.
Yes, could be chained, but for a selected dog owner, or we call it selected or special dog owner, it must be behind a fence, and I must be able to approach one of your doors without having to go through where the dog is normally contained.
Thank you, Councillor Stoltz. Anything further? Councillor Stoltz, does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering if people are aware of you know, in order for them to maybe get the instead of $85, they can pay $60. But I wasn't aware of that requirement. So it's very interesting, but I was just wondering if maybe I'm just uninformed. But
is it on the website? Is it on the website where people can access that information?
Yes, it is there. I am educating people as we go. We might enter properties and ask a question, are you a selected dog owner? No, well, look, your property's up to standard, and hand out a form for them to fill out and properly inspected, and then check. Always come back and I check to make sure that they have been registered on time and microchipped.
Great, thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've been a SOP owner for quite some time, but I realise too that I'm a gold card owner. And that's probably cheaper to apply through your gold card than it is an SOP. So I just thought that was worth talking about.
Thank you. Councillor Wharahinga.
Just to reiterate the stuff that Councillor Stoltz was talking about, One of my big things was around dogs and stuff like that when I first came in onto council, and I've definitely noticed a change in regards to dogs in our community, but not only from a personal experience, but anecdotal feedback from other people. I've noticed that the amount of people that are contacting me about, feeling like they've been had very bad engagements with our dog controls officer, that has dropped off majorly. I actually haven't heard from anybody in so long. I can't even remember when the last time I heard from someone, to be quite honest. And that comes down to the team. It's been, even when I've been out with the dog control team, like right at the start, people driving past would like yell things, and it's all, again, from my perspective and anecdotal. But when we've been out before, like when we went to Kaiti school, there was none of that negativity, like when people had seen us. Which leads me to my question from your perspective, and there's great information in the report, but there are some things that the report can't capture, which are the kind of experiences of our workers. Have you noticed that actually drop down from a worker's point of view?
Through Madam Chair, definitely. It's a lot easier to go and do our job for the fact that I look at it the way that we are trying to educate everyone, not just our young. We have to educate everyone. I can remember starting this job only 2 years ago and taking a dog off a property, driving at 9 o'clock in the morning, driving past at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon and going, oh my God, he's got another dog, So it's not educated. You're better to go there, have a word with these people and say, look, this is the consequences if you don't do the right thing. And make sure you follow through with it. If you're going to say this is the consequences, that's the consequences. But yeah, a lot better. Thank you.
Supplementary, like I've also heard the same things in regards to the engagement of our dog control officers with the community as well. They've appreciated those kinds of conversations. I'd like to see us think as a committee, think about the 2018 to 2023 kind of forward thinking in regards to dog control now, or dogs in general, because we've been so caught up in this mode of community engagement and kind of working to get to build our dog control engagement across the region. I'd like to see us start actually thinking of community-driven initiatives and things that are wider than just dog control, things like dog parks, etc., which have a lot of our community have actually already engaged us about that. Now I think we're at the stage where we can actually solidly think about things like these and put them into our future plans. So I'd like to see that come from EPNR. Maybe that's worked in collaboration with community development. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
I'd also like to move that we...
You're happy to move the report.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Forringham. Can I just ask on page 20, when we look at the 16-17 figures and the 17-18, and a number of them are a whole lot better, but two quite significant areas: the failed to keep a dog controlled or confined, there's 80 more dogs this year, and a failure to register a dog, we've got 150 not registered dogs. Now, I well recall one of our council colleagues asking you about the very reasonable discount that you were offering for registering menacing dogs some time ago. It would seem we are missing some of these dogs if there's 150 out there that have not been registered. So what can you tell us about?
Through Madam Chair. Yes, there is significant amounts of changes that we have made. This year, we had the highest number of registered dogs ever at 97.8%. So that was a huge increase for us. I can't say wholeheartedly that the dogs that have been missed registration are menacing. I don't think they all are. There is a lot of dogs out there from, average Joe Blow that has a foxy or a poodle that still haven't been registered. We do follow those up. Not sure if you're aware, but we now have an automatic system that if your dog is not registered by sort of mid of October, there will be an automatic infringement for your registration. And also my guys now are just the fact that is, if your dog's not registered, you're going to get an infringement for it. So that's part of the education that we're putting forward. If you want to go and get your dog registered, well, go and get it registered. You know, you can
I think that
bypass the
publicity around the special owners is really important because that's quite a saving for people.
I totally agree. I think we need to encourage that because the more selected dog owners that we have or special dog owners that we have, the easier our job is because they're responsible. They should be responsible. They should be keeping their dogs under control.
Perhaps we can ask that some information goes in a rate demand, Mr. Zam, can you maybe advocate at your level that where we send different levels of information out in rate demands, you know, the little strip flyer that goes out in a rate demand every quarter, it's about this size, and picks up a level of information. It might be a good thing, timely, to have some dog information on one and advocate for the registration and the controls that you require to become a special dog owner. We can tuck that away. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll certainly look at including it in the rate demands. And just in response to, as a further response to, oh yes, we have been finding more failure to unregistered dogs, but we have been increasing the compliance effort in terms of seeking those. So it would be useful to see that. I think we will be able to track in time the increase in infringements. Or what council officers do like to do is say your dog is unregistered, but give them some time to actually register it before issuing an infringement. But,
sure.
And that isn't captured and it's quite prescriptive in this report.
But I think it's realistic that most dog owners know that you do actually have to register your dog. They can't use it as an excuse that they don't know. But good that you're working with them in an effort to find ways to enable people to register them at the least possible cost. So we've had a mover from Councillor, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, I'm actually quite pleased to see the increase in the number of failed to keep dog controlled and confined. I'm not happy that I see the number go up, but I am happy that there's an awareness there because I think that's a real problem in the district at the moment. I think I can come into town just about any day and see a wandering dog. And I actually was getting onto the phone and saying, but I can't do that every day because I'm seeing so many wandering dogs. And it's a real problem because what they're doing is they're going out of their place, they're moving 3 houses down the road and doing their jobs on the properties down there. So the wandering dog thing, I think is a real problem in the area still, you know, and I think it's a really hard one to deal with because it's every day and there's quite a significant number of them. There's certain areas where it's worse than others. You know, one of my tenanted properties, it's a real problem street and I've called a few times on it and I followed the dogs back and found out where they go, so I was grateful that that was addressed. The other thing I think that may be a problem coming, and I don't know, but there's when they're looking at the new tenancy regulations now, one of the things they're looking at is that we cannot stop our tenants having dogs, and I think that could be a problem in the making if that law goes past as one of the many things they're looking at to keep the landlords grey. Thanks.
Thank you. You'll second it, thank you. Yes, no, I mean, and it's not just our poorer suburbs. I mean, you see quite a few. So would you like to make some comment on wandering dogs and Councillor Cranston's point, please?
Sure would. First of all, you know, we rely a lot on the public to notify us where wandering dogs are. We can't be everywhere. We do patrols, but we can't be everywhere. If you're seeing one every day, ring every day. And I tell this to the public. I don't care if you think you're being annoying to the council, ring every day. Our job is to keep the community safe and to try and keep these dogs to a minimum. If we don't know where they are, we cannot follow it through. If we don't catch the dog today, we might catch it tomorrow. And I can tell you that there is dogs out there that we've caught 6, 8, 10 months later. But we will carry on until we do find it. If we know about it, we will look for it. If we don't know about it, what are we looking for?
Thank you. Any further questions with respect to the first paper, which is the report? And that's on page 14. It's been moved by Councillor Wharehinga and seconded by Councillor McCain. 3 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried, thank you. So we move then to page 23, which is the menacing dog report. Do you want to add anything to that, gentlemen? Make any observations?
Through Madam Chair, no observations to add to the report.
Moved, Councillor Stoltz. Seconded, Councillor Wharehinga. No questions? I'll put that then. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. Page 27, and Ms Easton, we move to the paper. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for the work that you do in our community. Managed Aquifer Recharge update, and you've all got a little map on your desk. Thank you, Ms Easton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I've just given you all a map just to, if there's any questions you've got in relation to this report or the next one, since they kind of relate. So yes, just an update. I guess we are now in a pretty good space in terms of getting ready to start the next stage trial. So we've received confirmation of funding from the Eastern Community Trust. And we've also received our resource consent for the trial. So those are probably the key matters that we needed to address this year. We've also been progressing that enabling work for the stage 2 trial. We ended last year with some key recommendations from the stage 1 trial around better monitoring sites for our monitoring bores. So that we can keep a really good eye on the water as it moves into the aquifer and through the aquifer. So we have progressed to drill those new monitoring bores. And we've also done some work investigating the state of the other bores that we've been using for monitoring. And the committee will recall, we gave you a report last year just highlighting that we're a bit nervous about the wider state of the bore network in the Poverty Bay Flats, and that many of those bores were drilled in the 1980s, and we are now starting to see quite a number of bore failures. So we have checked all of the bores that we have been using for monitoring, and several of these had failed. So we've closed those bores and in the process of re-drilling in one location, which we see has been quite critical, a new council monitoring bore. So those are sort of the, I guess, the key highlights of the last 6 months, just in terms of going forward. We have quite a big program of science work that's associated with the trial. We also have, very importantly, to do the work with Rongwhakata Iwi Trust around cultural assessment. And so those are the things that we're planning to do over the next few months. And just in terms of likely date for start of the stage 2 trial, actually injecting the water, that's pretty dependent on the weather. If we get a summer like we had this year, where it pretty much started raining in February and never stopped, then it might be earlier. But if we have a dry summer, then it will be later in the season, but we will be all set to go when the river level reaches its 4,000 litres a second minimum. So just if you have any questions.
Councillor Dunn.
Yes, thank you. I see in this report that we got just over $500,000 from the PGF. Is this on top of what got announced on Friday last week, or was it part of that package?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, I think there's lots of announcements of the same thing happened there. So that was actually the first announcement from the PGF. I'm trying to think, maybe back in March, perhaps, was when we got announced that funding. So they're just, I guess, reminding us that that was an early announcement.
And can I just ask, through you, are you still working with MA Limited and alongside the other groups that you're working with?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. In fact, part of the funding application with the Eastern Community Trust included an allowance for working on governance options for a managed aquifer recharge full scheme. So that's work that we'll be working very closely with MA Limited on.
Thank you. Any further questions? Sorry, yes, thank you, Councillor Dunn. Councillor Cranston?
Yeah, is there clarity with both the council and Rongwhakata of what a good cultural impact assessment looks like?
So through you, Madam Chair, as part of the agreement around the Stage 1 trial, we commissioned a peer review of the cultural impact assessment that was done for the original trial, and that was with a consultant sought by Ronga Whakaata, and they've, as part of our consent conditions and part of what they included in their submission, was to use that information from that peer review to inform what is a good cultural impact assessment. So we'll obviously be talking with them about who is an appropriate person to do that assessment, but I think that we have some agreement about what sort of assessment should be done.
Thank you. Any further questions? A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Wharehinga. Thank you very much. It's really good progress. So with the recommendation on page 27 is moved by Councillor Dunn, seconded Councillor Wharehinga. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, carried. Thank you very much. And then an update on the Makari Aquifer water allocation on page 31. Thank you very much. Greetings. Thank you, Ms Thompson and Ms Easton. Other questions to either of our officers? I thought in reading the paper, because some of us are really interested in what it means, it would be really interesting to know how many applications we process at any one time. We just don't really have much idea of how many consented takes there are. So maybe next time you report, we could understand that there are 50 and 30 have been renewed, there's 75 and 20 have been renewed, you know, just a bit of detail around the quantum.
Yep, sure. Through you, Madam Chair, I've just got a little bit of those sorts of numbers with me at the moment, if you want just a really brief. Yes. I sort of know this sort of stuff off the top of my head, which is a little bit...
Thank you. If you'd like to tell us some more about it, that would be great.
So on the 30th of June of this year, 23 of the 32 Makari consents expired, and those consents all have the right of renewal. And so through this renewal process, we were looking at the reduction targets set in the freshwater plan. While the Makari Aquifer is the first water source to go through this process, all of the other water sources will be going through a similar process, mostly in 2019 and or 2020. I just know that we have about 160 consented water takes across the entire region. 95% of those are on the Poverty Bay Flats. Next year in 2019, we will have the majority of the Waipoua River consents come up for expiry, and that includes shallow fluvial and Waipoua gravel aquifers. And tied in with this year, so there were 23 Makoti consents, there's also 10-ish Te Hapara Sands consents as well, and there's another 10 that will be expiring next year. So we are trying to, as the plan has set out, align them so that they're all expiring in a bunch. We are getting there as we renew them.
And the duration of the renewals?
5 years, unless they can meet the requirements of the plan, which in an over-allocated water body is near impossible.
So we haven't allocated any others for longer? Yet?
Not yet, no.
Thank you. No.
So is that a total of 32, did you say, over the
we have a total of 32 consents. We actually have 31 now, so through the process of renewals, one has been surrendered.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Councillor Stoll.
When I read this and and we look at the stats that says, I'm trying to find it now, that there were 3 which had a greater than 80% reduction. And at the top of our report, you do state that you've been in constant contact with consent holders. That is a significant reduction. Were those reductions agreed by the consent holders voluntarily, or were they told, looking at their because you say in the report you look at a 6-year max, over the 6 years what max they use, were they told this is what it was going to reduce to, or was it more a two-way process where you worked with consent holders?
Through you, Madam Chair, I guess through the freshwater plan development process, it was always sort of noted that consent renewals would be based on past usage. So there was sort of an understanding that it would be based on that, but in terms of an actual number, through discussion. I had 65 consent renewals this year, just of all of the water permits, and I met with almost every single consent holder and talked them through the process and what they're, not in the number, but this is likely what your consent might look like. Okay. So they had an understanding it's not going to be a big fright or surprise in terms of, here, this is what you're getting, but it possibly is a little bit less than what they were hoping for. We have worked out a final allocation in what we believe is the fairest way possible. I think we tried really hard to find something that is the best possible solution given the rules that we have to fit within.
Thank you.
It would be fair to say that all through the development of the water plan, Ms Easton and others had numerous meetings with the user groups, didn't you? So that it isn't a total surprise that it has been something that has been shared with potential users over 3 or 4 years. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Dunn?
Just in light of the previous paper that we had about the recharge, how are these two projects going together? Is it a possibility that if the recharge is really successful, then the allocations are going to change? Just wondering what the synergy is between these two.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think that would be an ideal situation, but unfortunately it's not the way our plan is written. So we will be required, if the recharge trial is very successful and that leads to a full recharge scheme, it will require a plan change for us to stop reducing allocations. So the plan is built on the premise that the aquifer is in decline and that we will not be successful. And that's just a timing issue, really. It's because when we were doing the work to develop the plan, the MAR was an idea. It wasn't a sort of where we are now. So we have, very clearly identified that we'll need to do a plan change, and I think that we would look to commence that process in 2020 if the stage 2 trial.
But the long-term gain is to allow more water for irrigation. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. It might be new permits, or it might be, but it would require the plan change. But it certainly is to allow the use of water for horticulture, isn't it?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. Great, thank you. Do we have a mover then for the recommendations which appear on page 32? Moves Councillor McLean. Is that second, Councillor Dunn? Oh, Councillor Stoltz. No further questions? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary carried. Thank you. My goodness. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us, Mr. Zaman? Thank you, council officers. Is there anything you wish to share? We've got a workshop? No. I'll declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much. I need to catch Lois. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.